Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Com 498 show. I'm Tony Palmieri from the Communication Studies program at UW Oshkosh, joined by someone today that I've really admired for a long time. And he was one of my first students. I started at UW Oshkosh way back in 1989. And my guest today, Patrick Downey, we'll call him Pat. He graduated in 1990. So he was one of my first students. Today, he's a business development specialist with Spectrum Communications. He did obtain an MBA, Master of Business Administration, around 2007 from Edgewood University. We'll get into all of that. Pat, thanks so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we'll get into your time at UW Oshkosh. But first, let's just start off with what does a business development specialist at Spectrum do?
Great question. So, if you think of a brand new subdivision, before the houses are built, there's roads, there's sidewalks, there's storm sewers, and there's probably some green pedestals in the backyards or the front yards. Half of those are usually the power company, the utility, ready to hook up a house, and the other boxes out there are from the communication company. So I work with developers and municipalities and utilities to plan the construction of those pedestals in the backyards of all new residential single-family housing in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So that's a mouthful.
Yeah. And you've been doing this since when?
It'll about 3 years.
It's been about 3 years, and we're later on in this interview, we'll get to your trajectory of how you got to where you are right now. Let's go back though. Let's start with the Pat Downey story. Where are you from, and what led up to you going to UW Oshkosh in the 1980s, I guess?
Yeah, so I grew up just north of Milwaukee in a town called Cedarburg, and I was the oldest of three boys. My mom's family goes all the way back to the founders of that town, and my dad and my mom met at college down outside of Chicago at Northwestern, and my dad's mom was from Ireland. So on one side, I go all the way back before the Civil War, and the other side, I'm a second generation born in America. So a little bit of a
Wow.
mix. But I chose Oshkosh. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I was an okay student in high school. We had a really good marketing program. I enjoyed that. Went to DECA, all of those things. I also enjoyed speech class back in the day. I got over the extreme nervousness pretty quickly. So when I went to pick a college, Oshkosh was about the right size. It was about 11,000 students, I think, back then, about an hour away from where I grew up. And it just seemed like this was a, good state school, and I'll figure it out when I get there.
And
And
close enough to still get home to Cedarburg if you
yeah,
wanted to.
yeah, if the laundry got out of hand, I still had an out. And, food wouldn't spoil on the way being delivered. So
What did your parents do for a living back then?
yeah, so before I was born, my mom was a speech therapist, and then when she had the three boys, she became a stay-at-home mom. And then just as I was graduating high school, she went back for her master's and became the reading specialist at my high school. So just as I was graduating, she was then a teacher. So I gave that little present to my two brothers as I left, like, have fun with mom at school. And my dad was always in sales. So my mom's side of the family ran a floor covering store. My dad started out there when they first got married, and he became a salesperson for the manufacturers and the kind of the middlemen of floor covering. And he'd visit all these little floor covering stores, most of them independent, across the state. So from my perspective, he had this cool job where he set his own hours. He got to go visit his friends, take them on
Mhm.
fishing trips. I'm like, this is the way to go. I want to go into sales marketing. Uh, and when I got to Oshkosh, here's what I remember. I really enjoyed the business classes, except for the math ones. I mean, business math analysis and statistics. I think I got a D in both of those. Even
Okay.
when I retook them, I got Ds. So at the same time, I was taking speech classes under Dr. Benson, I believe, and I
Oh, sure.
really, I really enjoyed those. He was a very patient, cool guy, and he just kind of shepherded the underclassmen kind of through the whole process.
I just gotta say, Pat, just Dr. Jim Benson, the late Dr. Benson, he passed
Yes,
away some years ago now. A really, really great man. And in fact, he was the chair of the department when I got hired,
yes.
and he's much missed. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, at some point, a guidance counselor caught up with me and pointed out that, well, let's see, you're not doing so well in the business classes, but you're getting all A's in your communication classes. Maybe you should consider, majoring in that, maybe getting a minor in business, as we called it back then. I'm like, oh, okay. Again, no real plan, just kind of go with the flow. And it seemed like a good path to be on at the time.
Hmm. Did you have, or let's ask it this way, what was your experience like in at that time we called it speech communication.
Yes.
It was the speech communication major. What was
Mhm.
your overall experience like?
Uh, it was a lot of fun. I think I got over the fear of public speaking early on,
Yeah.
and I remember being really impressed that there had been so much research into communications. I just had never really considered all of that, that there was all this stuff behind the thinking there. I know when I by the time you came on board, I had just come back. I spent that summer at Disney World on their college program, so I'd been immersed in this company that had almost perfected storytelling and mass communications and marketing, and my head was kind of spinning after that experience. And here's what I remember. You come along, you're very passionate, and you start to kind of break it down into, here's all the core rhetoric stuff, and here is how not only private companies but governments use these things either for good or for evil. Here's these speeches that maybe you knew vaguely of from Lincoln or Kennedy or Reagan or Hitler, and here's what they were trying to do either for pure good or pure evil. These were mostly guys using these tools, to the nth degree. And again, my head was like, whoa, I'd never considered, that all this was kind of going on and not just kind of free thought speeches.
You know, Pat,
Or,
at that time, I'd only recently gotten my doctorate degree, 1987. I had
Mhm.
one job before UW Oshkosh for 2 years, came to Oshkosh in 89. I was still, young. I was still
Yes.
in my late 20s. I'm kind of glad we didn't have camera phones back then because I would
Mhm.
almost like dread to see myself now, right? Back
Yeah, there was, and again, I'm just being honest here. I think you were the first professor I had in the whole experience at Oshkosh who was like just as honest as you could be. And it was just like, here's how I see the world. Here's what I know. What do you guys think? And there was a lot of that. It wasn't just sit down and listen to me, preach for 60 minutes or whatever the classes were. It was, I'm going to start a conversation. I expect you to join in and not just.
And yeah, and something, Pat, I don't want to be nostalgic about it,
Mhm.
but that obviously was the pre-cell phone era.
Yes.
And I look back now and I think, okay, there's always been students that might like fall asleep in the back or whatnot, but the level of distraction back then was so much less than it is now,
Oh, absolutely.
right? And back then, I was much more likely to get pissed off by
Hmm.
someone saying something really ignorant or they didn't think about it or whatnot, rather than like someone staring into their laptop or their phone for an entire hour,
Right.
right?
Well, I think your biggest tripwire, from what I remember, was someone being lazy. It
Yes.
wasn't, if that was all they had for ability, that's fine. They're bringing 100%. But if they could operate up here and they were just kind of phoning it in, those are awkward moments because.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, Pat, because that has remained. I think a frustrating thing for most teachers is when we do engage people that you can tell
Mhm.
there's a high talent level there, but for whatever reason, it's just not being expressed. And I've always thought
Right.
that my goal was to try and help push people to meet their full potential. But I've heard you talk in the past. You've come to visit my classes a number of times over the years, and you didn't necessarily, in your own evaluation of yourself, you didn't necessarily reach your potential at the start. Is that right?
No, I was. you know, I think I was smarter than my grades would indicate. Let me
Yeah,
put it that way. And
absolutely.
at some point, as the classes get harder and this cliff of graduation gets closer and closer, the mind tends to focus. And what kind of did it for me is when I again met with the guidance counselors, they were like, well, you can't finish in 4 years. It'll have to be 4.5 with the way things are going. And the only way I could do that was to take 3 credits of debate participation that final semester. So that meant that I had to go pretty much every weekend on a debate road trip
Wow.
and debate at these other schools. And the topic was whether or not the federal government should censor artistic expression in America. And I don't know if it was mostly for things that they funded, government funding of the
Oh
arts,
yeah.
or what if it was just in general. But again, to me, this was almost like a capstone class in itself because when I was doing all those speeches we had to do in the comms back then, it was almost like stand up. It's like, okay, here's my routine. I'm going to go up there and hit on these points. There'll be a little interaction. I know where the punchlines are. I'm good. And all of a sudden in debate, it's like everybody got the same assignment, and the assignment almost becomes secondary. It's like I have to tune in so much to this person on the other team and what their strengths are, their weaknesses, because I've had to do exactly what they're doing on that side of the argument. Because we had to switch the sides of the argument so much that the argument almost didn't mean anything. It was like I have to find their weaknesses and exploit them. So that taught me so much about how to listen and tune in and
Yes.
organize my own thoughts. So whatever nerves I had, those had to be pushed way over here because now I'm up here having to look at my note cards because it was all physical media back then. These are my facts that I have. And at some point you start to memorize them and these maybe they have different facts, but I'm just trying to think how can I beat them in the judging format that I'm aware of. And how's the judge's nonverbal communication? And so I'm working all of this, and I just found it really engaging. And even though I had to do a heck of a lot of it, and we even went to Washington, D.C., I think right before graduation, it was 4 of us. We went into a UW Oshkosh like airport van, and we drove that thing out there debated, I think in Annapolis or DC or somewhere out there, and then drove back right before graduation in a blizzard. I just
Oh
remember
man.
being really engaged about, these are skills I even knew back then. I'm like, I can always use this. And I still, to this day, use all those skills.
Do you remember who your partner was, your debate partner?
Mike something, Kathy Dorentia was on the team,
Okay.
and Jen, I think. So it was 2 girls, 2 guys. And it
Right.
was just really intense because it's like we're just going to go out there and we kind of practice on the bus, um, you know, and you talk about this one subject for so much, it almost becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
But the format of how to organize your thoughts, read the other side's arguments, and come up with a strategy, all while you're standing up there in a suit and tie. This is back, full business dress. I just found it a very interesting kind of arena to compete
Well,
in.
our debate program was a victim of budget cuts,
Okay.
and it's so horrifying because everything you're describing, the in-person engagement, the getting to know partners, the competing, the building confidence, everything debate did for you is so needed now.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's just such another terrible example of the short-sightedness of higher ed, right?
Well,
And
I
how
think,
we don't prioritize the things that are really needed. I mean, I have people, all professors do now, that have difficulty getting out of their shell.
mhm,
Remember how debate got people out of their shell?
yes.
You had no choice, right? You're up there. You're in front of a literal judge. How much time did you spend in the library back then getting your case together?
A whole lot. And that's just it. If you couldn't find it in a physical page, because there was a barely an internet back then. I mean, you were truly the first professor I ever had who said you can send me your paper electronically versus going down to the reading lab, is what we called it, and
Oh,
print it
wow.
out. So, I'd carry these three-inch floppy disks and go to the IBM two computers that we had, type out a paper, and then usually have to go somewhere else to get it printed, and then hand you the paper copy, which you'd empty a red pen on, and then hand it back. So it was a very different time. You had to find information where you could, and that was it. If it wasn't in the library, you did not have it.
You did not have
That's all
it.
there
No.
that's all there was. So if someone had this cool fact, you might steal their card or after the debate say, "Do you mind if I write all this down and copy it?" Because that's amazing.
Wow.
It's very powerful. So I charmed a lot of people out of their facts or whatever we call them, their
Yeah.
knowledge points. It's just that's what you had to do.
So then you drive through the blizzard,
Yes.
or your team does. You get back in time for graduation.
Mhm.
But when you graduated, Pat, things weren't necessarily easy at the start, right? Did you have
No,
difficulty finding a job initially?
it was, well, from what I remember, I think there was a recession on or something like that. And I honestly didn't have a plan. Now that's all on me. But also I was quite busy every weekend with these debates. So a little bit's on the department and the university. But what I had to do, here's what I did. I got out of school. I started working some hourly jobs so I could interview when with flexibility. And at some point, I got a position with the United Way of Greater Milwaukee. Now it's United Way Greater Milwaukee, I think, in Waukesha. They've combined the two United Ways, but I got a seasonal position for the fall campaign, and the job was really go out there, give public talks in front of employee groups to raise money
Mm,
for the fall campaign, and then United Way distribute it to nonprofits. So I knew nothing about nonprofits. I knew nothing about United Way. I grew up outside of Milwaukee, not really in Milwaukee. So I had a lot of strikes against me, but I knew I could do public speaking. I knew, just give me the talking points. I can get this across.
right.
And I think I really just thrived in that environment. It was very fast paced. It was very much every employee group was different. Some you're in a factory floor one afternoon, the next morning you're in a bank, next afternoon you're in like a boardroom talking to like CPAs. So it's all over the place. So I really enjoyed it. I'm like, there might be something here. It's also where I met my wife, so kind of a positive memory in that environment. After that, I had, I think, a 3 or 4 month job with the Milwaukee Brewers in their season ticket sales office. That's also where I realized I like baseball and I was doing really well at it, but there were guys in there who just loved baseball. I mean, they loved it. They didn't need the media book to look up the facts. They knew all this. And I'm like, you know what? These guys are better suited for this, not me. But that's about the time there was an opening with United Way of Dane County here in Madison. So I moved to Madison, started doing what I did before, except now I'm on staff. So now instead of being the seasonal employee, I'm managing the seasonal employees. Again, no real idea what happens the rest of the calendar year during for the United Way process, but I learned really quickly and interacted with a lot of volunteers, which at that level are a lot of CEOs, went to a lot of employee meetings, did a lot of persuasion. So all those persuasion classes that I had at Oshkosh about, how do you approach a subject? How do you listen effectively? What's people's nonverbal communications? Honestly, this is all very analog. So I'm out there, there's a paper pledge card. If I get you too emotional with the stories that I'm sharing or someone from an agency is sharing, you start to tear up. You can't fill out a pledge card if you're crying. Let's be honest. So I have to, I can't give you both barrels.
Yeah, underline something, Pat. So you got a bachelor's degree in speech communication, and within a few years of graduating, you're dealing with CEOs
Yes,
in
absolutely.
the sector. And it sounds like from what you're saying, your communication degree was actually a perfect degree for what you were doing.
It was because none of this was really spelled out in any kind of training or anything like that. It was a lot of thinking on your feet. So, right back to debate, right back to I have a set of ideas I need to get across. I need to ask you for significant resources, your employees' time, a corporate donation. I need to be able to shift based on what you tell me. If you throw all these objections up, I need to be able to recalibrate and say, I'll get you have questions, I'll get you answers. This isn't good timing. We're going to reformat and come back with a different approach or different people besides me, maybe a different volunteer or a CEO of our organization because this is a high level disagreement. None of that was like, if this happens, do this. It was like, okay, you're there, make this happen. So I did that for about 6 years or so. Went to what was not called a startup back then, but one of my volunteers had a computer startup where they were building physical computers and they just purchased a company that had dial-up internet. So I sold for them for about a year, and then they got bought by a local phone company. I'm like, you know what? I'll go back into fundraising. So I went to work for the UW Medical School, raising money for research center that we're building here in Madison. Whole different level of fundraising. That's where you're talking to people who are giving honestly $1 million gifts. Their accountants are in the room, their attorneys, sometimes they're their family members, their spouses. Sometimes they're very pumped up, but their spouse isn't. Sometimes the attorney's looking at you, the CPA sideways. Why are you taking my client's money or trying to get them
Yeah.
to invest in this thing? And
Wow.
most of the time, these are planned gifts. So I had conversations back then that still haven't come to fruition because folks haven't passed away yet. And it was a lot of planned giving, but it
Wow.
was it was taking the seed of a relationship. So again, I went to Oshkosh, not Madison. So I'm already one step out of the club, but my wife did go to Madison. So I'd find these
Mm.
ways like bring in, hey, I'm part of the family. This is what the university is trying to do in medical research and patient care. And you can push that further down the road. You can make this happen at this level, but let's talk about how that could happen financially. So it was just understanding the framework of what kind of sales pitch am I in here, and what can
Yeah.
I bring to the table, and when can I learn to stop talking and just let them express, how they're doing.
So somewhere in all that, you did get married,
Yes,
right? What year did you get married?
96.
96. And you and your wife have how many kids now?
Two kids, both in college. Yes.
Two kids. And how old are your kids?
Great question. 25 and 21.
Wow. I That's when I start to feel really old, when my former students' kids are in their 20s. Is your wife still employed in that same kind of area?
Yes. So my wife went to work for kind of the same group of companies I was in, where we were in that startup company. She was there actually. We worked together. That got bought by a local phone company, which got bought by a company called TDS, which is a regional phone company. And she kind of found herself interested in usability. So before there was really a thing, how people interact with computers, with software, because the phone company would have these billing sites, and they have to understand that people can order things or pay their bills. And she went back to get her master's in that field. So she's still doing that. And we've always kind of been on the technology side. And once I finished with the UW Foundation, I kind of felt like, okay, I've raised 10 years of my life raising money here. I would like to
Yeah.
go raise some money for me. That's when I went back to get my master's in kind of Rayovac Spectrum Brands was a big employer here in town. They just went through a merger. They needed someone to sell basically batteries to industrial customers. I'm like, great. They have a very strong tuition reimbursement. I'll go back to school. I'll do that during the day and go to school at night. And at some point, they went bankrupt.
Oh,
They kind of
wow.
fell apart. So I came over back, kind of back, circled back to TDS. And that's how I kind of got in the technology side because in the early 2000s, voice as a product was kind of at its peak and
Right.
internet was kind of starting to surge. So I kind of got in on the ground floor of how businesses started using data. So I've always been in business sales. So I started to understand how can companies use this new technology to be more efficient, to set up a website, to maybe get online orders or to get emails from their customers. And that led to a series of jobs at, smaller data centers or different kind of brokers of data services. It just kind of all fell into place because once I knew that I'm just there to help businesses solve problems. yes, it's technically sales, but it's really it's like help me understand where your pain points are, and I can maybe bring you some solutions. And if I can't, I can find folks who can, even from our competitors. And once you kind of take that approach, at least for me, sales was pretty straightforward, pretty easy.
Right. Now, I've heard you tell students before that those jobs that you're describing now, so now we're like around the early 2000s and so on,
Mhm. Yep.
those jobs did not exist when you were a student, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, the technology just wasn't there. So there were no really private data centers. No one was selling internet services. Internet was just a thing literally between, universities and maybe the government. It's just kind of this almost Morse code telegraph channel for sending research papers back and forth. And, eventually it gets, more commercial. You're able to put video on it. Smartphones come out now. People they can't live without it because so much of our culture has shifted to that platform.
Would you, if you were speaking to a graduating senior right now, would you tell them that there is a very strong chance that the job they have 10 years from now does not exist at this moment?
Oh, yes, 100%.
100%.
Yeah. And even if it exists, the whatever impact AI is going to have on apparently all of us 10 years from now, that job will probably be very different. My guess, and it's only a guess, is that the tasks that you do will be very different. And I can only use, my ancient memory of in high school, I had to learn to type on a electric typewriter, but we had to set up the margins and the spacing, and you had to do all this prep work just to fire off a letter. And now, I've opened up a document in whatever platform I'm on, and that's all done for me. So I'm hoping, that the AI evolution essentially comes down to I don't have to set up my own margins, but I can still type my own letter. Maybe it's the letter's already typed for me at this point, but I don't know. So yes, there will be change. I've done very well just being able to adapt.
Now you mentioned the word data. You were working in kind of like early data centers, I guess,
Yes.
right? And as you know, modern day data centers have become somewhat controversial, especially in our state of Wisconsin, where there's proposals to put them in many areas, and apparently they are very resource heavy, right? In terms of like using water and so on and so forth. Um, do you believe that Wisconsin should be welcoming these data centers with open arms, right? That these are going to happen and that we ought to be part of this 21st century wave? I mean, what's your view on this?
I think like all development, there's smart development and there's development that's just Wild West. And I'm
Yep.
sure you've been to cities or states where it's just obvious. You go down the main drag and like, okay, this was Wild West. There was no code, there was no planning. They slapped stuff together. And you've been to other cities where like, wow, this looks really nice. This probably didn't just happen by accident. So I think if as a state, as citizens, we demand that our politicians, our leaders, ask really hard questions. If you're going to build, a building, a structure that's nothing of this scale has ever been done by humans, especially in Wisconsin, what is the impact on the water? What's our water table currently at in this area? Can it
Mhm.
support this? We're blessed and cursed with the largest freshwater supply of pretty much any people on the planet.
Right.
So it's very easy. Oshkosh is on the biggest lake in the state. Milwaukee's on the biggest, one of the biggest lakes on the world. It's very easy to take this stuff for granted. But in the middle of the state, there's not unlimited water. We're already pretty strong users of water
Exactly.
for agriculture and other things. So if the resources can be managed in a way that they can support this, if the data centers can pay for power in a fair way, if the utilities can provide that power without, crimping the local consumers, then yes, by all means, we should get on board. Where that line is, I can't tell you for
Right.
those
Exactly.
resources, but it's not in whatever the companies propose on the first attempt. I can tell you that.
Right. Exactly
There
right.
probably needs to be some real self-awareness on the behalf of the state about what we can allocate for these enterprises.
Yes. Absolutely right. Now, if we go back to your own career path, it looks like in the 2010s up until now, you had a number of positions.
Mhm.
Can you kind of just like summarize what you did in that period?
Yeah, so TDS, when I was in there in those positions, selling business services, and in that time, the state of Indiana was my territory. So I would drive down to Indiana a whole lot and talk to those businesses. But it's also when the Great Recession hit, '08, '09.
Oh,
At
yeah.
some point, the company has to restructure. Despite the fact I'm on President's Club and selling a lot of stuff for them, I'm like, okay, this is it. So I made a pivot at that point. I knew of, smaller data centers in the Madison area, and I went to work for them and worked with, local customers and kind of rebuilt my local network. And as those positions evolved, I would move from one company to another for always, a better situation. And I
Hmm.
was very fortunate in that when I worked for Rayovac, when I worked for TDS, my customers were outside of Wisconsin. But as soon as I never quite cut all those ties locally. So when situations would change and I'd have to find a new position, or it was obvious that I was going to have to find a new position, I still had connections. So I've always benefited from the networking side of it. I've always been as active as I could be in the local chambers or any kind of groups like that, and I've always kind of enjoyed going to networking events. So
Yeah. I noticed on your LinkedIn profile, you call yourself a stellar relationship builder.
I do, huh?
Yeah. You probably haven't looked at that in a while, right? But has relationship building been essentially what you see as what you have been bringing to the table in all of your roles?
Yeah, I always tried to, the effective listening class or whatever it was called back then.
Yeah. Effective listening.
One of the things that I clearly recall was they talked a lot about the late night television shows at the time and how they would interview the celebrities and how, they would have us watch a few tapes of it. And here's some folks that are just giving the latest spiel about their movie. But the really good folks, whether it was Johnny Carson back in the day or Letterman, they would drill a little deeper and get them, tell me about this personal thing in your life. So they've been cued, obviously, ahead of the show. Hey, ask them about their kids or they're breaking their arm skiing or something. And I also recalled that because in these networking relationship, endeavors, whatever you want to call them, if you get people to talk about themselves and you ask the right questions and you kind of steer it, to what's exciting them in the moment, that to me has always been very effective at building a strong relationship. Now, I've got lots to say and I could talk for hours, but if I can ask you just a few questions, usually that makes them feel really good to talk about themselves and they leave like, ah, that guy was pretty nice. I mean, it's not magic. It's really
Right.
just getting them to talk about themselves. And I've been blessed with a good enough memory that usually when I meet someone, I might not remember their name, but I definitely remember their stories.
Yes.
So that part of my brain somehow organizes itself and kicks back. Hey, this person talked about this. You should ask about that and look at their name tag because you don't remember their name tag. And it was interesting during COVID when I did a lot of this online. I don't really remember most of the folks I met in those networking groups. And it may have been just because I was watching so much Netflix. So I'd be like, you look a lot like that detective I saw on the Netflix show. Or are you that accountant that works across town? I honestly don't know.
Wow, that's fascinating. So we've talked about listening and building relationships, but in a more general sense, as you reflect back on your entire career since 1990,
Mhm.
what has been the role of this thing called communication in your success? How important is this thing called communication?
For me, it's been extremely important. I mean, I made the decision, or consciously or unconsciously, not to zoom in on a specific trade, whether that was, being an accountant or, hardcore marketing person. I think I could have gone either one of those directions, but I didn't. What I can do is go into pretty much any meeting, any company and just kind of learn a heck of a lot about their culture. And maybe that's from all the United Way visits too, about how they talk to each other, how they communicate, um, uh, pretty much any idea what kind of advertising they do. And that has allowed me, there's a certain skill set to just kind of slip into those lanes and
Right.
either try to, be a part of that group or connect with them and just build a friendship, for lack of a better phrase. So I've always, at some point it becomes less what classes did I take and just kind of what skills have I built and evolved. I think it was very scary, when I graduated, I'm like, well, what am I going to do with all this knowledge? And it
Mhm.
wasn't until, the debate experience and then the United Way experience, like, well, you better use it because you're on stage. So go. So it's more of a fear of failure, I think, that drove a lot of that. But at some point, you find your own voice and
Yes.
you figure out, I can bring value. I can probably bring value here. I don't know if I can bring value here. I might be able to fake it long enough to learn this, but I definitely can't. I don't think I'd work over here. So you start to understand, what environments you would succeed at, what you probably do okay at, and what you should probably avoid.
You know, the ability to communicate with anyone at
Mhm.
any time
Yes.
has got to produce a competitive advantage for the person who could do that.
Yeah. So my earliest memories on my mom's side, so my grandfather only went to school through the eighth grade and then like worked in a factory, was a milkman, started a floor covering store, but he could talk to just about anybody. And I swear I was in high school until I realized, we'd visit him in Florida and he'd be talking to someone. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, he doesn't know them. He just met this person. This isn't one of his friends, down at the fishing pier. He just started talking to them. And I became kind of in awe, like, wow, that's really powerful. Because I could tell from the level of conversation they were having, they were right in it. Like they'd known each other 20 years. And I'm like, at some level that never left me that I should always try to aspire to make that level of connection.
Isn't
I
that
don't think I've
amazing?
ever been able to do it as easy as he was able to do it, but I've gotten close.
That's amazing. Now, the world that students in 2026 are graduating into is much
Yes.
different than the world that you graduated into in 1990. Do you have any advice for students who are navigating this current job market?
I think one of the things that I did not really have a grasp on, which is pretty easy to do, is just kind of a self-awareness of what needs to be your anchor as you graduate. Is it location? I want to stay in the Fox Valley. I want to stay in Wisconsin. I want to head to the East Coast or the West Coast. You kind of have to settle that, and no one else can really answer that question, whether it's family or friends. Once you
Mhm.
have that, I think the other pieces fall into place, whether it's what industries am I interested in, or what kind of position am I interested in, um, or a certain company. If you kind of narrow that down, then the search is how do I get connections in those kind of silos of how do I
Right.
get connections if I want to move to Denver in Denver. And if I was doing this today and I wanted to move, instead of moving from Milwaukee to Madison, I wanted to move out to Denver, I would simply pick up the phone or send emails to the Chamber of Commerce or any other group and just say, hey, I'm going to come out there. I'm looking for a job. Could I come to some meetings and just sit in the back? Could I do
Right.
that for free? And if it's an industry that I know that's in Denver, I'd be like, hey, is there any trade groups that have meetings out there? Can I go attend those? Going through the automated online job search where you have to recreate your resume and do all of that and fill out all their questions. I think if you only do that, it's a recipe for frustration.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you sometimes you just have to do it. You just have to, bear down and do that work. But what else are you doing? And I think that really gets down to finding connections. And even if it's writing handwritten notes to CEOs saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in the area, even if you're not going to be in the area. I want to get, can I stop by and have a cup of coffee and just learn, you've built this huge business. Hey, Craig Culver, you've built Culver's. I would love
Yeah.
to have lunch with you. I will drive out west of Madison and meet you at your at your headquarters. I want to understand what makes you tick. Most folks are so honored when they get a request like that. And I've gotten a few over the years from your students, and I've done what I
Yeah,
can. Maybe because I just keep telling this advice is that if
yeah,
you can get into a local group and just say, "Hey, I'm looking for a job, and I will do just about anything because I know I want to work in Denver. I know I want to work in this either company or industry. I'm willing to start out in shipping, even though I want to do sales, and just
mhm,
be willing to put in the work." Because there's not a lot of folks out there doing that, to be honest. There's a lot of people
exactly.
trying to go through the online version of it, and that's just designed to narrow the field. That's all it is.
Pat, what you're saying is so important. I get so many students that will say things like, I don't have enough experience. I don't know enough. I don't have the skills. And I always say, you have the knowledge, the
Yes.
skills, you know enough. The problem is the people that can impact you positively don't know you. Right?
Right.
So what you're saying is you have to make yourself known to the
Yes.
people that can actually help you. You mentioned Craig Culver, spectacular guy,
Hmm.
right? Who loves meeting with young, ambitious people,
Yes.
right? And that's the thing. Take the risk, and it's really not much of a risk because the
No.
worst that can happen is the person doesn't respond to you or says no, right?
Right. And
But
don't,
get to know someone.
yeah. And I think, you're not going there for them to hand you a job. You're going there for, think of you one piece of actionable advice.
Yeah,
And maybe you connect with them on LinkedIn. That's a win. And if you spend your days either before or after graduation doing that, at some point something's going to kick loose. And
yeah,
if I was doing this today, I would probably start in the medium-sized companies in whatever city I was going to try and move to that doesn't have such an automated um, defense network of keeping out job applicants. And I guess that also, if I was graduating, I would understand my own ability to adapt and how do I handle change? And is it something that triggers me and I have some kind of panic attack, or I'm okay with it if I handle it this way. And I would
mhm.
just kind of condition myself that I need to handle it more the way that I'm okay with it. Because as we mentioned, AI is probably going to change most positions.
Oh yeah,
Companies merge, companies go bankrupt. I've gone through that. I've been promoted. I've been downsized out. It's just this has changed, and you have to find a way to push through it and learn to just be persistent and to focus. I guess that would be my other piece of advice. Um, with my own cell phones, and everyone around me has cell phones, the ability just to put that down and focus with someone is almost like
yeah.
a Jedi trick these days. And that phone in my pocket that's vibrating, I'm gonna leave that in there zippered because I'm talking to you. And if it's really urgent, they're going to call me back 4 times and then I'll probably answer it. I don't know.
Wow.
Most people, they'll twitch if they have to do that. It's just
Yeah,
it's not something that's become very normal. And I guess I'd also find some way of just being aware of, what part of my life needs maintenance, whether that's physical, mental, you know, the maintenance with your friendships, your possessions. I think it's really easy to let part of that go when you're a student because I'm trying to get through this process. But I think as you kind of age out of that mindset, you start to realize I need balance. I need balance, and all these areas of my life. If I leave one area totally untouched, eventually it's going to come back and haunt me.
absolutely. Pat, I'm going to forward your contact information to students who may want
Of
to
course,
follow up with you. I'm sure you're okay with that.
happy to.
Uh, yes, thank you so much for doing this. And you've been really an inspiring alum of our program. We appreciate everything that you do, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you. This was a pleasure. Thank you.